I bought my 2011 Mustang GT on November 16th, 2022, and as of the date of filming, it is currently November 25th, 2023. So it has been over a year that I have owned and lived with this now 12-year-old Mustang GT. So how has it been? Why did I buy this car? How has my experience been owning it? And what's gone wrong, and would I recommend it? Well, let's get into that right now. But really quickly before we do that, I just want to apologize to regular viewers of this channel that this video is up on Sunday and not Saturday. Saturday is always going to be the regular schedule for uploading, but this week has just been extremely busy and chaotic, and I had really last-minute plans that I made with family that I haven't seen for a long time, and I just was not able to get this video together on the timeline that I normally would. And this is not honestly the video that I was planning on making in the first place, but let's go ahead and get into it. So why did I buy this 2011 Mustang GT? Well, for me personally, I have never owned a muscle car. I've never even owned a V8, and at the time that I bought this, well, at the very tail end of this experience is when I bought this, but I was working at a dealership as an entry-level mechanic, and I essentially was working on a lot of muscle cars and stuff like that. I worked on the occasional Hellcat and things like that, lots of Scat Packs and General Charger and Challenger RTs and stuff. And it really made me want to get a V8. I've always loved muscle cars, but by the time I started driving, despite the fact that the area that I live in the Midwest, is very muscle car focused, I kind of had like moved into other interests, like a lot of Japanese cars and stuff like that. So muscle cars just didn't really trip my trigger in the same way as they did when I was maybe younger before my driving years. But I have always loved them, and it kind of just made sense for me to buy a Mustang as I looked around for different options. I really like Challengers, but the driving experience of them is just a little bit more numb than I generally like. I definitely don't think they're bad cars, and there's a reason that they're super popular. A lot of people love them. And I generally really love Camaros. A Camaro is one of the first cars that I ever really wanted, but ultimately, for some reason, something about the overall looks and just general vibe of the S197 Mustangs were really suiting what I was looking for in a car, and it just made a lot of sense for me. And this is funny because I kind of went along with the trend a while ago of like making fun of and kind of like hating on Mustangs. Not in a way where like I genuinely believed what was being said necessarily, because I just thought it's fun. Same way that people like to hate on Hondas and stuff like that. But who cares? Whatever. I owned a Subaru WRX before this, so I'm quite familiar with vehicles being hated and having tons of stereotypes and stuff. Sometimes it's entertaining. But one thing that I did know that I wanted, after considering a lot of different options, is that I wanted to get a Coyote Mustang. So here we are. 2011 was the basically minimum year that I was looking for, because I wanted to at least get a Gen 1 Coyote. Here we are. It's a 2011 with a Gen 1 Coyote, and when I bought it, it had 107,000 miles, and it now has, I don't know, let me check. Very prepared. It now has 117,000 miles on it, just under, and I have enjoyed every single one of the miles that I put on this car for the most part. This car is super fast. I mean, I know that it's no Hellcat or something like that. It's 400 horsepower from the factory, 412. This one has long tube headers and a full exhaust from there. That's how I bought it. And it also has a 93 race tune on it, so it most likely has a decent bump more than that, but regardless, it's 412 horsepower from the factory. I know that that doesn't sound that crazy in modern times where horsepower is just absolutely insane with EVs coming out left and right. I mean, like the base model Rivian has the exact same motor and battery setup as the top spec Rivians, if I'm not mistaken, and they all literally have 800 horsepower, and that's just a truck. So I get horsepower is crazy, but please don't be mistaken. 400 horsepower is still a lot of power, and this is still a very fast car. It is way faster than anything else that I've owned to date, and it is super fun. The driving experience of it is so different to everything else that I've owned. Just the V8 performance, real nice. The sound is amazing. I love the looks. I think that it looks iconic. I personally think I will always like the looks of the S197 Mustangs over the S550s. I'm just a huge fan of retro design. And honestly, I know that this is a solid rear axle and that everyone thinks that they handle like complete trash. And don't get me wrong, the solid rear axle is definitely not ideal, but it can genuinely handle pretty well, and especially with a couple small modifications. I've done a ton of research about this, and hopefully, in the coming summer, in a slightly better financial situation, I will be able to do some upgrades and some general videos about how you can make a solid rear axle Mustang handle way better than a lot of people think it is capable of doing. But as it is, it's not a bad handling car. And also, when it comes to modern day cars, I know that this is not small and it's not like it's light, but it's not actually overly heavy either. This specific car probably weighs in the range of or just under 3,700 pounds. And anymore, that's kind of just like a middle average weight sports car, as crazy as that is. And as far as the experience of owning this car, buying it at 100,000 miles, personally, I wasn't really worried about it, but let's go ahead and get into any issues that I've run into and basically the problems with this car and things that I've addressed and things that I still need to address, things that you might run into if you were to buy a 12-year-old 100,000 mile Mustang. Which, by the way, the fact that this is 12 years old and it will be 13 years old next year, which is how old my 04 350Z was when I bought it years ago, really blows my mind. Time is moving too fast. I am about to have a breakdown. But as far as problems that I've had with the Mustang, I mean, there's a few general really small things. There were some cosmetic imperfections, not surprising on a car this age. You know, the wiper arms were pretty beat up and were super chipped up and faded. I painted those with a flat black spray paint and just made them look basically new. Something that I haven't shown in video is that I replaced the trim that's on the wiper cowl because the trim that was on it was all flaky and falling apart. So, I mean, I spent whatever it was, like $13 or something on Amazon for some of this, which is just weather stripping with like a 3M tape on it. And it's definitely not a perfect solution, but it's a lot better than paying $200 for the individual wiper cowl pieces. I've done a lot of general little touch-up paint things with it. It still really needs a full paint correction. It is very scratched up, stuff like that. The wheels that came on it were suboptimal, to say the least. So we put some nice MMD Zevin 20x10 wheels on it all the way around. We swapped the current tires that it already had over onto these, but with the wheel size that is currently on this car, we should be able to run a much more aggressive tire size in the future. And when it comes to mechanical failures, I haven't really had many issues with this car at all. I mean, the Coyote is a pretty proven platform like anything. It has issues here and there, but generally it hasn't been bad at all. I did have to replace the alternator on it. That's really the only failure that the car has had. The alternator started to go out. I started to get a code to check the charging system. At first the voltage didn't seem to go down, but eventually it started to deteriorate and it was no longer charging the car. So replaced the alternator with a new one and it's been perfectly fine since. Of course, really easy fix. And really the only other issues I've had have just been with a tiny little bit of hesitation at very specific times with the throttle on the car, where it will kind of cough or, like I said, hesitate or something like that. And it doesn't affect the way the car runs. Literally 99% of the time, it's generally really, really good. The data log reads that everything's running very well, exactly what I would expect. But I have my suspicion that the factory fuel pump unit might just be starting to get a little bit worn, and it's not a return style fuel system, so in events where it needs fuel very suddenly out of nowhere, it could be just going lean for just a split second and causing that little bit of cough or something like that. So that's something that I will address in the future. In the meantime, it's not a huge deal. And I will say that's just an assumption with the research that I've done, is that it's probably the fuel pump. Occasionally, I have a little bit of a long crank when starting the car. as well. It doesn't normally do that, but it does happen on occasion, which also points to fuel pump and or fuel filter, which in this case, it doesn't have an inline fuel filter. When they switched over to the Coyote engines, it's like an in-tank sock style fuel filter. So I would just replace that at the same time, and I'm assuming that will probably fix the issue. I have not personally had any issues with the MT82 transmission. I know that that is a huge thing that people are concerned about, is the transmission in these cars. Honestly, I think that people act like they are worse than they are generally, because I don't think that it shifts that bad. It's definitely not a good shifter, but it's not that bad. I felt just a million manual shifters that are far worse than this car. It's slightly below average. You can get shifters on the aftermarket that make it a pretty decent shifter in the long run. And as far as the literal reliability of the MT82, with like the shift forks and stuff being a problem on these, I haven't run into that issue. Who knows if I will in the future, but generally I think that with most things, if you take care of it and you don't drive like a complete idiot, it is probably significantly more likely that you will not have trouble. But ultimately, would I recommend a Mustang to other people? Well, yeah, because the thing is, the only thing that bothers me about driving a Mustang is that people just typically think that you're a Mustang guy. And somehow being a Mustang guy is different from just being a general car enthusiast. But here's the thing, I own this Mustang. I don't necessarily consider myself a Mustang guy. I like them. I like a lot of different cars. But for me, this is not necessarily a vehicle that I would have expected that I would buy if you asked me like 5 or probably even less years ago. But here I am, and I absolutely love it. So I'll say that if you've ever looked at a Mustang, and it doesn't have to be an S197, it doesn't have to be a Coyote car at all or anything like that. If you've just looked at Mustangs and you've wondered, I wonder how those are, well, there's a Mustang for pretty much any budget, so hey, maybe you owe yourself to try it out when you look at getting your next car. Because hey, it doesn't have to be the end-all be-all, and you might be surprised how much fun you end up having. Kind of like I was. I was expecting to have fun, but I have to admit this is a lot more of a car than I probably actually expected that it would be. It's not just a straight line piece of junk, it's a genuinely decent car. And what little things are not ideal about it, you can tell it has a lot of potential. And here's a weird little thing that a lot of people don't know about the S197 chassis. Because of the solid rear axle, a lot of people act like it's probably not ideal for handling and stuff like that, which the solid rear axle generally is not. However, one thing that shocks a lot of people is that the chassis of the S197 Mustang is actually incredibly torsionally rigid. I have a little list here that is taken from an article series that was written by Billy Johnson about building a project S197 Mustang track car, and he has a list here of vehicles in comparison with torsional rigidity to an S197 Mustang chassis, and the numbers might shock you. Now, I'm not an expert about this, so I might sound really stupid when it comes to the math on this, but I believe the torsional rigidity is being measured here in Newton meters per degree of flex, if I am not mistaken, of which the S197 Mustang is 21,000. A NA Mazda Miata is 4,881, and that's a vehicle that is typically seen as being an awesome handling car. Of course, it's a convertible, so that's not that surprising. Honda S2000, also known as being another great car when it comes to handling, also a convertible, is 7,100. A BMW E46 Coupe is 12,500. A Chevy C7 Corvette is 14,500. BMW E90, or E92 I would assume, is 22,500, and a Ferrari 360 Modena is 23,000. So even that Ferrari 360 Modena, which is a supercar, is just barely more rigid than the S197 chassis, which is incredibly impressive when it comes to performance potential. And a lot of those cars on the list, like the E46 BMW, the M3, that's a car that is world-renowned for being a fantastic driver's car, and this is a car that actually has a more rigid chassis. So that solid rear axle, again, not ideal, but don't let it fool you. It's not a deal breaker. These cars can be made into serious performance machines. It is possible, and I, in the future, am going to do my best to prove that. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate all the support that we've had on the channel over the last several months. We have more than hit our target for subscribers for this year. Let's see how far we can go. I just want to thank you guys so much for all that support. And if you particularly enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button as well, and I will see you guys all in the next one.